Have Gun Will Travel, Season 6, Episode 10, A Miracle for St. Francis. Detailed summary. The 10th episode of Have Gun Will Travel Season 6 is titled A Miracle for St. Francis, and it takes Paladin into Mexican territory for a story that combines adventure, humor, religion, theft, deception, and an unusual test of his ability to solve a problem without simply reaching for his gun. The episode originally aired on November 17, 1962, and runs for approximately half an hour. The central premise is straightforward. Paladin travels to the San Luis Rey mission in search of a rare old brandy, only to discover that the mission possesses something he wants but refuses to sell: a stolen statue of St. Francis. Then becomes the key to a bargain that sends Paladin into a complicated search involving several suspicious characters. The story begins with Paladin traveling south of the border. His immediate objective is surprisingly peaceful compared with many of his usual assignments. He is searching for a rare vintage brandy associated with a Spanish mission. Paladin is an educated and sophisticated man, and his appreciation for fine food and drink is one of the details that separates him from the stereotypical Western gunfighter. He is not traveling to hunt down an outlaw or settle a range war. Instead, he hopes to obtain something rare and valuable for his own purposes. However, when he reaches the San Luis Rey mission, he discovers that getting the brandy will not be as easy as simply paying for it. The mission's religious atmosphere creates an immediate contrast with Paladin's usual world. The setting is quieter and more traditional, and the priests are concerned with matters very different from the commercial interests Paladin normally encounters. The man responsible for the mission, Father Clare, becomes an important figure in the story, rather than treating Paladin's request as a simple business transaction. The priest explains that the precious brandy is not something he is willing to sell. Paladin, however, is not the sort of man who gives up simply because someone says no. He listens carefully and looks for another solution. The situation changes dramatically when Paladin encounters a young Mexican man named Paco. Paco is being pursued by an angry group of villagers, and Paladin intervenes before they can capture him. According to the episode's plot summary, Paladin stops the mob, takes Paco with him, and brings him toward the mission. Paco claims that the villagers drove him away because of trouble involving women. He is clearly frightened and desperate, and he immediately sees Paladin as someone who may be able to protect him. Paco offers to watch out for Paladin in exchange for saving his life. Paladin, however, makes it clear that he does not need a personal bodyguard. This interaction establishes an amusing contrast between the two characters. Paco sees Paladin as an impressive and almost invincible figure, while Paladin sees himself as perfectly capable of handling his own problems. The young man's enthusiasm creates several humorous moments, but Paco also becomes increasingly important to the story. As Paladin learns more about the mission, he discovers that the priests are facing a serious problem. A special statue of St. Francis has been stolen. The statue is not merely a decorative object. It has significant religious and emotional importance to the community. Its disappearance has created distress among the people associated with the mission, and Father Clare wants it recovered. This discovery gives Paladin an opportunity. The priest cannot simply sell the brandy, but perhaps a bargain can be made. Paladin agrees to recover the stolen statue in exchange for the rare drink he originally came looking for. The arrangement transforms Paladin's peaceful shopping trip into a detective assignment. He now has to track down a religious artifact that has been stolen from a mission, identify the people responsible, and return it without creating unnecessary bloodshed. The episode's premise is therefore built around an unusual challenge for a man whose professional reputation is based on his ability to use a gun. Paladin begins investigating the theft by speaking with people around the mission and studying the circumstances surrounding the disappearance. His intelligence becomes more important than his weapon. He understands that stolen property rarely disappears without leaving clues. Someone had to take the statue, someone had to transport it, and someone else may be waiting to profit from it. The search takes Paladin into a world where religion and commerce overlap. The statue may have spiritual significance to the mission, but to thieves it can also represent money. This difference in perspective becomes important. A sacred object can become a valuable commodity once it leaves the community that considers it holy. Paladin's investigation introduces several colorful characters, including Maria, Hope, Faith, Lundeen, and other figures connected with the mission and surrounding community. The episode's guest cast includes Rafael Campos as Paco, David Garner as Father Claire, Naomi Stevens as Maria, Tina Menard as Hope, and Miriam Goldina as Faith. The presence of Paco adds another dimension to the investigation. At first, Paladin sees him primarily as a young man who has gotten himself into trouble. Paco's explanation for why the villagers were chasing him does not necessarily tell the whole story, and Paladin remains cautious. He understands that people often tell partial truths when they are frightened. This is a recurring characteristic of Paladin's investigations. He rarely accepts the first explanation he hears. He listens to what people say, but he pays even more attention to what they do. A person's actions can reveal motivations that their words attempt to conceal. As Paladin continues searching for the statue, the episode gradually develops into a small mystery. The theft is connected to people with different motives, and Paladin must determine who can be trusted. He encounters deception and conflicting stories, forcing him to rely on his instincts and experience. What makes the episode particularly interesting is that Paladin is not simply looking for an object. He is also navigating a community where personal relationships matter. In a small frontier environment, everyone knows something about everyone else. Romantic relationships, jealousy, resentment, and economic interests can become intertwined. The stolen statue is therefore only one part of a larger web of human motivations. Paco's presence also allows the story to explore the difference between courage and recklessness. Paco wants to prove that he is useful to Paladin, but his eagerness occasionally places him in situations he may not fully understand. Paladin repeatedly demonstrates that courage without judgment can be dangerous. A person does not become brave simply by refusing to acknowledge danger. Paladin's approach is much more calculated. He knows when to speak, when to remain silent, and when to allow another person to underestimate him. This patience gives him an advantage over people who expect a gunfighter to respond immediately with violence. The episode's religious elements also create an interesting philosophical contrast. Paladin is not portrayed as a deeply religious man, yet he respects Father Claire and understands the importance of the statue to the mission. He does not need to share someone's beliefs in order to respect what those beliefs mean to them. That attitude is characteristic of Paladin. He is skeptical without being needlessly disrespectful. He questions people without automatically dismissing them. He is willing to work with individuals whose worldview differs from his own. This flexibility helps him navigate the complicated circumstances surrounding the stolen statue. As the investigation develops, Paladin gradually gets closer to the people responsible for the theft. The story emphasizes that the object has become valuable precisely because it is difficult to replace. The statue cannot simply be reproduced and returned. Its history gives it meaning. This idea parallels Paladin's own understanding of human relationships. Objects can be replaced, but individual lives cannot. A stolen statue may be recovered, but a person's reputation or trust can be much harder to restore. The episode also plays with the concept of miracles. The title, A Miracle for St. Francis, suggests that something extraordinary may happen, but the story deliberately leaves room for a more practical interpretation. Paladin himself is the man expected to produce the miracle, yet his solution does not depend on supernatural powers. It depends on intelligence, courage, negotiation, and an understanding of human behavior. In this sense, the episode offers a playful interpretation of the title. The miracle is not necessarily something supernatural. Sometimes a seemingly impossible problem can be solved through human ingenuity. The closer Paladin gets to recovering the statue, the more dangerous the situation becomes. The people who stole it have no intention of surrendering their prize easily. Paladin must carefully calculate his next move. His gun remains available, but he understands that using it could create unnecessary casualties and make the situation much worse. This is one of the defining qualities of the character. Paladin is extremely capable of violence, but he does not treat violence as his first solution. He knows that shooting someone is easy compared with resolving a conflict intelligently. The episode therefore gives him an opportunity to demonstrate another kind of strength. Instead of simply overpowering his opponents, he outthinks them. His ability to remain calm becomes increasingly important as the various characters become more nervous and unpredictable. Paco, meanwhile, continues trying to prove his worth. His loyalty toward Paladin grows stronger, partly because Paladin saved his life and partly because Paco admires his confidence. Their relationship becomes an important emotional component of the episode. Paladin does not necessarily want a companion, but he gradually recognizes that Paco is more than a temporary inconvenience. The young man's presence also adds humor to the story. Paladin's dry personality contrasts sharply with Paco's enthusiasm, creating moments in which Paco attempts to impress his new protector while Paladin remains unimpressed. The humor prevents the episode from becoming overly serious while still allowing the characters to develop. Eventually, Paladin's investigation leads him toward the stolen statue and the people responsible for taking it. The final stages of the story demonstrate his ability to combine diplomacy with carefully controlled force. He understands that the mission needs the statue returned, but he also recognizes that escalating the conflict could endanger innocent people. The resolution therefore reflects the central philosophy of the episode. Sometimes the best solution is not the most violent one. Once the statue is recovered, Paladin can finally return to Father Claire and fulfill his side of the bargain. His original objective, the rare brandy, becomes almost secondary compared with everything that has happened during the investigation. What began as a simple search for a valuable drink has turned into an adventure involving a stolen religious artifact, a frightened young man, and a community struggling with conflicting interests. Father Claire's willingness to make the bargain with Paladin also reinforces the episode's theme of exchange. Paladin provides a service, and the priest provides something Paladin values. Yet the real reward is not material. Paladin has helped restore something important to the community. The statue's return represents more than the recovery of stolen property. It restores a sense of order. The people associated with the mission can once again feel that something important has been returned to its rightful place. Paco also emerges from the story with a new understanding of loyalty and courage. His experience with Paladin teaches him that strength is not simply the ability to defeat an opponent. It also involves knowing when to act and when to exercise restraint. Paladin, meanwhile, once again demonstrates why he is such a distinctive figure within the Western genre. He is a gunfighter who does not define himself by violence. He can move between cultures, social classes, and belief systems without completely losing his own identity. The episode ends with Paladin's immediate objective fulfilled. The stolen statue has been recovered, Father Claire's problem has been solved, and Paladin obtains the rare brandy he originally wanted. The journey has also reminded him that even the strangest assignments can become complicated when human emotions and personal interests enter the picture. A Miracle for St. Francis is ultimately a story about solving problems without allowing violence to become the automatic answer. It combines mystery, humor, cultural tension, and religious symbolism while giving Paladin an opportunity to demonstrate his intelligence rather than simply his marksmanship. The episode's premise is unusual for the series, but that is exactly what makes it memorable. At its heart, the episode suggests that a real miracle does not always require something supernatural. Sometimes what appears impossible can be accomplished when people are willing to negotiate, trust their judgment, and look beyond their immediate interests. Paladin enters the story searching for a bottle of rare brandy and leaves having restored a stolen object that means far more to other people than it ever could to him. The episode therefore reinforces one of the most enduring qualities of Have Gun. Will travel. Paladin may advertise